to ask you a series of questions. And we want to thank you, first of all, for spending the time, finding time for us. We're a book club and at Annie's house, Annie Banks' house, and she said the most remarkable things about you, and your book was very interesting to us. So we're very pleased that you took the time to find space in your life for us tonight and have a series of questions for you. Would you be prepared to answer them for us if possible?
You're prepared to answer them?
Oh, absolutely. I have a copy of the questions. I can go through and give you answers. I think that's a good way to start.
Okay.
Bob, I'd like to introduce you or have Allison introduce you to the group first and the other people who have joined in the Zoom from other book clubs and other places. So Allison, she's just going to come in. So I could start by saying that I met Bob and Patty in 1981 when I was on a little grassy area with my baby who was a year old. And Bob and Patty were returning to Beverly Hills from New York, Pennsylvania. I can't remember where you were living then. And we ended up living in the same complex together, the same floorplex. I was upstairs with my family. Bob and Patty were downstairs with theirs, and we became fast, wonderful friends. And I consider Patty to be one of my best friends. So Bob comes along for the ride. He's the collateral damage. So would you please introduce Bob by reading his bio, Allison? Which is, it's extensive, and Bob, we're just going to condense it.
They're going to condense it.
Okay, I'm going to sit on your lap.
You don't have to. Hand it. It's really for the group.
All right. Hi, Bob. Nice to meet you. This is Allison. All right, so it's wonderful you're here with our entire book club. So we really appreciate your time and effort that you put into dedicating.
Yes.
I can't.
She just thank you.
Okay.
No.
So Robert Tanenbaum is the author of 32 books, including Echoes of My Soul, about a case cited by the Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren in the famous Miranda decision. Tanenbaum is one of the most successful prosecuting attorneys, having never lost a felony trial, so quite impressive. He was assistant district attorney in New York County, where he ran the Homicide Bureau, served as chief of the criminal courts, and was in charge of the DA's legal staff training program. He also served as deputy chief counsel for the Congressional Committee investigation into the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born in Brooklyn, New York. So if you would also kindly contribute some more information about that later on in the meeting, we're quite interested. And Tanenbaum attended the University of California at Berkeley on a basketball scholarship where he earned a BA. He received his law degree from Bothell School of Law at the University of California, Berkeley. So I appreciate your time. He taught advanced criminal procedure for 4 years at Bothell at UC Berkeley. His first book, Badge of the Assassin, was used for years at Yale Law School as part of their criminal procedure trial practice course. So we would love to hear more about that. All right. Thank you, Bob.
Well, thank you. First, it's hard for me to hear anything, so I have an interpreter sitting next to me who hears a lot better than I do. But I want to thank you all, particularly Annie. Annie, are you there? Can I see you around there somewhere? Oh, good. Okay.
I'm here. You see her?
So I want to thank you guys for coming, and it's always a pleasure to talk about the books, but this book is very special. And I go out of my way in the book to make sure you understand why it's so special, because my relationship with him was a 46-year friendship that occurred after he finished his investigation that is the book. And that investigation dealt with the total corruption that led to the murders of Jockey Blonsky, who had been in the union, the United Mine Workers Union, along with Boyle for 30 plus years. And he had his moment on the road to Damascus and decided he was now going to run against him for president and take over, hopefully, and do the right thing for the mine workers. Mine workers were being paid, by the way, at this time, $115 a month. There was $180 million in the bank of the United Mine Workers in Washington. Imagine living on $115 a month. And the question was why? And one of the issues about this whole case has always been, why did Boyle think it necessary to kill Yablonsky, his wife and daughter, on December 31, December 31, 1969. And the killers went up in the house at that night, and they killed Charlotte, his daughter, who was 25 years old, his wife Margaret, and Yablonsky himself. What's fascinating about the case, and the reason why I got involved in this book, was because the case in and of itself is something, once I spoke to Dick about it, and the reason Sprague and I had the chance to talk about this was that I met Sprague on the telephone in October of '76. And he had just finished all of his trials, he thought, in April of '74. That was his last trial, he thought. That was the 5th trial. And that was Tough Tony Boyle he tried. He worked his way up in the case. The murders occurred, as I said, the end of December. The bodies weren't found until January 5th. Sprague was appointed special prosecutor. He was from Philadelphia. This case happened in Clarksville, which is approximately 50 miles south of Pittsburgh. And Sprague was appointed special prosecutor in the case in or around March of '70. And he then wound up trying and bringing to justice the 3 killers, the corrupt union people, Jackson Prater, who was an intermediary in this case. Boyle trusted him, gave him the authority and the direction to hire 3 killers to kill the Yablonskys. And Sprague worked his way up to Prater. And in the Prater trial, some fascinating issues arose. Sprague, the biggest reason I wanted to do this book was because when Dick explained to me what I'm about to explain to you, which I don't have to explain in too much detail because I'm sure you read it, and he was fighting a system that did not want to see this case brought to justice. But Dick Sprague was known throughout Pennsylvania as the go-to guy on any kind of trial case. I was in the Manhattan DA's office, as you heard, and I wasn't following it. It was a very front-page story, this case. And one of the reasons was it was a front-page story, notwithstanding the brutality and the absolute inhumanity of the murders that occurred, was that the powers that be in the United Mine Workers spread their tentacles across major institutions in the state of Pennsylvania, one of which happened to be the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And during the course of what happened in Pennsylvania, post-murders, the powers that be on the Supreme Court reversed the case in February of 77. Why did they reverse this case? As I said, it was one of the most flawed opinions I'd ever written or even knew about in its injustice, and it's an outrage. In each trial that you try when you try these cases, the judges and the defense attorneys will ask for offers of proof. An offer of proof is what the witness is about to say about the issues in the case. These aren't just gatherings where you just air what you think should be heard. It has to be evidentiary and it has to be with respect to the issues that are involved in the case. And now when it came time for the defense, and Sprague did this, of course, Sprague was masterful. And let me throw in here, having myself tried various high-profile cases, which are basically mirrored in my 29 novels of my crime-fighting family and my 4 nonfiction books, Sprague was brilliant. I attribute my good fortune to the people who taught me how to try cases and how to administer justice in Manhattan. When Frank Hogan was the DA, who was legendary in his own right. When I applied to that office, there were 800 applications. I didn't realize that, there would only be 17 spots, but even that was more than they ever had. But anyway, when it came time for the defense to give an offer of proof on their witness, the defense attorney said, we think he's going to say the following. Sprague immediately interrupted and said, what do you mean you think? The offer of proof is what you intend to obtain from the witness for purposes of this trial with the issues that matter. And he said, well, I haven't spoken to the witness yet. And the judge says, you're giving an offer of proof on a witness you haven't spoken to? He said, yes. He said, well, I'm not permitting this witness to testify. You have time before the end of this trial to speak to him. The defense never spoke to the witness on appeal. But he did say that he thought that there were other people who were eager to kill Yablonsky, who were in District 19, which is in Middlesboro, Kentucky, the heartland of Appalachia, and that his testimony should be taken based upon that hearsay. The judge refused to do that. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, on February 77, reversed the trial of Boyle and said, in its opinion, incredibly flawed, I had to repeat it at least 100 times for you, that what the witness was going to say, notwithstanding having never spoken to the witness, was very important for the jury to hear. So he made speculation the truth and embellished upon it. And that was the basis for the corruption. Now, there's another reason that has plagued me with this book, which is so annoying. And that is, a book was written. There are about 5, 6 books written on this subject, these killings. And one was in the last year or so, or maybe more, year and a half ago. And in the reportage of the book, the author never mentions that Sprague retried Boyle in November of 78. Now, why is that important? Because Albert Pass, who I'm sure you all know, who was the Secretary Treasurer of District 419 in Middlesboro, he was a tough hombre. He was involved with a lot of violence that was necessitated by counter-violence when the United Mine Workers were being formed as this union, a major political piece of work. And people just didn't line up in the street and say, gee, this is a great idea, which in my judgment was a great idea. It's a great idea to have countervailing authority when you're dealing with the workers of America. That doesn't mean the corruption is justified. But it was very important that happened. And one of the biggest reasons was Albert Pass, who Sprague convicted in 73, around June of 73, after he convicted Prater, the Union person who was very close to Boyle, who hired the murderers for Boyle. Pass, believe it or not, when this case was reversed, called up Sprague and told Sprague he wants to testify for the people. Now, as you know from reading the book, the Appalachian culture is a major character in this book. And it has a lot to do with the Scots-Irish and the Puritans when they came to America. And that aspect of it was that we are the city on the hill, said John Winthrop in circa 1630, when he was on the Arbella, the ship coming to Massachusetts Bay. And he said, since we are the city on the hill, we must be moral. And if we are not moral, God will punish us. Well, God has done a lot of punishing with respect to the morality and immorality of what happened in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. But notwithstanding that, the creation of our great country permitted the kind of reform that was necessary. But the whole issue here with Pass was, Sprague said, as you would say, you want to testify? You were the major mover here with respect to your friend Boyle. And in his own trial, Pass never even offered him a defense. He never took the stand. He was that kind of a hard-nosed character. And so Sprague asked him, why do you want to testify? Why would I put you on the stand? Because when I put a witness on the stand, I'm vouching for that witness's credibility. Right now, you have no credibility to me. And he said, the reason why I want to testify is I know Boyle. He's making me appear to be the originator of what happened here. I am not the originator. What I did was wrong. I participated in these killings without question. Now, Sprague received from the court 3 counts of murder that the jury gave him. Each of those counts was for life. So there were 3 life terms that each of that the killers had to face. In addition to which, Sprague said, I'm not going to give you any plea. If you want to testify, you testify, and I will cross-examine you. And to be sure, I will cross-examine you on your theory of what's going on here with Boyle and the reasons for it. And that's exactly what happened. So within the year ago, or year and a half ago, let me return to that moment. I read all the books about this thing. It's all reportage. It's all about as if you were writing a newspaper story or a magazine article. But worse than that, in the book, the author never mentioned that there was a 6th trial, never mentioned that the case was reversed, never mentioned that Pass now is testifying for the people. These are amazing events. I can tell you all the hundreds of cases that I've tried to verdict successfully, thank God. Never did we have a situation that Sprague was involved in where he tried individually 5, and he tried Boyle twice. It doesn't happen. What does happen is people like myself can try a case, wind up on one occasion, regrettably, with a hung jury, and then retry that case and get a conviction. But not what Dick did here. And now, how do I meet Dick, and why is it so important for me to talk about this book? Dick called me, as I told you, I hadn't followed the trial. He called me in October of 76. And he asked me if I would come to Washington with him. He was just named chief counsel and chief director of the staff for the investigations into the assassinations of Martin Luther King and President Kennedy. I had not ever spoken to Dick before this. I didn't know who he was. I'm a very provincial character. I was consumed with trying to get quality dispositions on the 250 new cases that came into the Manhattan DA's office on every day. 150 from 9 in the morning until 5 at night, and another 100 from 7 at night until 2, 3 in the morning, 7 days a week. And I had volunteered. I was assigned as a young assistant DA to all that. And it's very, very important stuff. But it's not to say that what Dick did was not important. Of course it was important. But from my point of view, I was not involved in it at all. So he calls me and he tells me this in October of 76. And I said, why are you calling me for? I mean, seriously, you're from Philadelphia, you're telling me, and so on. Why me? And I'm not looking for another job. And if my boss didn't die, Frank Hogan, Patty and I would be living in Manhattan right now. We're having a long distance telephone conversation with no probability. And he said, no, I know all about you. I want you to do this. Will you meet with me? Well, we did meet. I went to Philly to see him. He came to Manhattan. And of course, I decided that I would take that job. And we started that job in January of 77. It was a select committee, meaning it had a life of 2 years. So the committee would end in 78 and December 31. Sprague and I together, when the committee wanted to interview me, the committee was very high-minded. So we thought, because I said, I don't think you should hire me, because I'm not wired to compromise on search for truth. The Congress cannot deal with 415 executives. You must compromise. Otherwise, you can't get anything done. But I told them, I'm not going to compromise if I'm hired on search for truth. I can't do it. So there are other good people out there, far better than I. Seek them out, and we can help you find them even. And Sprague said, well, they promised they would not get involved in this investigation. That is to say, interfere with it. And I said, if there is any interference with this, I think it's a terrible mistake to hire me. So they said, we're not going to interfere. Lou Stokes, whose brother was the first black mayor of Cleveland, was the chairman of the committee. He was a terrific guy. He was not an ideologue loon. He cared about people. He cared about improving the lot of people in America, white and black and otherwise. And after 4 months, this whole thing caved in. And why it caved in is still a mystery to me, to the extent that when you investigate a case, what are the first things you do? Which is what I applied to this case. And that was, you speak to the people who were at Dealey Plaza. This is the Kennedy case now. You speak to the people at Dealey Plaza. You speak to the doctors at Parkland. There's a good documentary on now about Parkland doctors, which I would urge you to watch. It's called, what is it? What's the name of the movie theater? Wait a minute. It's called Plus. It's blank Plus, but it's Paramount Plus. If you can see Paramount Plus, watch this documentary. And I had just a part in redrafting it for the people who originally did it. But it's important for people to understand what the Parkland doctors' contribution to this was, and still is, and will always be, because I'm telling you now, Lee Harvey Oswald, based upon immutable facts that cannot be in any way contradicted, could not have killed the president. But that's another story for another time. I'm doing a book about that in a memoir fashion. But the point of it all was that.
But it was a JFK, what the doctor saw? Yeah,
that's it. Yes, that's it. What the doctor saw, the meeting of the Parkland doctors.
JFK.
Okay, that's enough tangent work here. So, we'll proceed on here. And the bottom line is that what happened with respect to this case with the Appalachian culture was that when John Winthrop talked about us being the city on the hill, I've always agreed with that notion. Those are the basis of our values, the basis of of our values of integrity, honor, loyalty, and courage. And so when people say, what do you believe? I tell them what Washington provided for us, and right back to the history of America. And again, that needed serious reform in its practice. That's why we unfortunately had a civil war and on and on. So I was amazed when Dick told me the story of the case. He wanted me to try the retrial. And in the process of what happened in this case was that one of the lead killers testified for Sprague after he was convicted and was doing life term in prison, 3 life terms. So this wasn't a situation of people just plea bargaining. As a matter of fact, one of the most important things that Sprague did was take over the leadership of this investigation, because the FBI wanted to plea bargain the whole case out. They didn't care about the qualitative disposition of it. They disposed felony cases for felony pleas. And that's what they went to the New York Times with. That's what they do all the time. All of these phony administrators. There is no qualitative relationship generally on plea bargaining with sanctions and punishment. You don't go on a subway, for example, with a machine gun, mow people down, and then plead guilty to a felony and wind up doing 1 year. That's the worst of what plea bargaining is all about. Sprague told the FBI there'll be no plea bargaining in this case, period. And you can imagine, because there were federal issues in this case. So the bottom line is that not only did the lead killer, that is the killer who put this thing together, was, as you know from reading the book, Buddy Martin was the lead killer, a kid 23 years old who enjoyed killing people. The brothers, here's the Appalachian part. The brothers of Gilly's brothers went to Sprague and said that they wanted to talk to him. He was in prison now for over a year, with no hope of any plea or any mercy, nor did he deserve any. He cold-bloodedly went into that house and blew away 3 precious lives. As far as I'm concerned, that still matters. And the 3 brothers said to Dick, why would you please let us speak to our brother? And Sprague said, why? They said, because our parents are older now and ill. And they claim that the only way they'll ever see him in heaven is if he tells you the truth. Think about that.
I remember.
All the cases I've had, this never even came close to that. In the case, in the case with Prater, the bottom line in the Prater case was that he obtained the killers, as I mentioned several times. And after the trial, his wife and 7 children were in the courtroom, and his wife said, I would have convicted you, hearing the evidence. And he said, then you would have convicted an innocent man. When his lawyer heard that, his lawyer got a hold of him alone and said, you better tell your family the truth, that you're guilty as hell. If you don't, they will forever believe this terrible injustice was done and walk around with that weight on their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Prater testifies for Sprague against Yablonsky. I'm sorry, against Boyle. So now you have one of the shooters, you have one of the major co-conspirators here, Prater, and it's all coming together with respect to trying to legitimize, as Boyle did in this whole case. It's the other reason why this case is so fascinating and important. He planned from inception to lay this case out on his colleagues. And that's why, knowing him as well as he did, Pass went to Sprague. But what he did was he formed groups, he formed a committee, Boyle, called the Research and the Research and Information Committee, which was a non-committee. But he formed that committee to get the blood money to the killers. And so he said, and he had his people say that since 1968 in September to September 69, 23 retirees were working on this committee and the union didn't pay them. And we're very, very concerned about always making sure we pay people on time. Of course, the committee didn't exist. But he had various people come forward and say, guess what? This committee does exist. And in the Prater trial, Prater, Boyle, and Pass, this is now Dick trying this case, trying Prater for 3 murders. They alleged that the committee did exist. And Sprague was concerned that these 3 guys in suits who were intimately involved, and Boyle, don't underestimate this guy's expertise on being a deceitful, vicious murderer. Decided that they would lie and try to get him off because they saw this as the coming of the battle between Sprague and Boyle. Up until now, Sprague was consumed with killing, with the killers, convicting the killers. And in the case, this goes to show you about going through as a trial lawyer, what he went through, assuming nothing other than to make sure you check every fact out. The defense in the case had put in the witnesses that I just mentioned as who were going to testify for the defense. It was the witness Turnblazer, you know, from this case. He was the president of the union in Middlesbrough. Pass was his secretary treasurer. He was scared to death of Pass. Turnblazer was your typical lawyer character who was afraid of his own shadow. So he never interfered with what was going on with these different plots that Boyle had set up. But on the report that Dick required of who the witnesses would be, Turnblazer's name was missing. And it was a Friday in Erie, Pennsylvania, because the case had been moved around because of publicity. Sprague sent out Bill Curtis, about whom he wrote a very complimentary letter to J. Edgar Hoover because of his outstanding nature and teamwork and relentless work that he did as an FBI agent in this case for Dick. He sent Curtis to get a hold of Turnblazer. And he asked Turnblazer, and he did, and he asked Turnblazer why he wasn't being called as a witness. Well, was he? And his name was left off the list. He said, no, I'm not going to testify. I'm not going to lie anymore. And that was explained to mean there was no committee. Dick, I was going to say to this day, sadly, he's not here with us. I miss him dearly. Dick always believed that when Turnblazer testified for him and the judge permitted the testimony on Saturday, the following day, that he was responsible for the jury not believing that the phony committee actually existed, for which he received a 15-year sentence. It's the only sentence that was less than life in the case. So the other reason is, if for nothing else, I wanted people to know what it really takes from the point of view of the honest prosecutor, what you must go through with respect to exculpatory evidence and handing it over right away, not 2 years down the line, but as part of your job. This is not just about winning. It is, I know it sounds like a commercial for DAs, but it's a critical reflection on who we are as a people, how we handle the justice system. And the way it's being handled today is enough to drive me crazy. We have DAs like in New York I don't know what they think they are, who they think they are, but they're certainly not representing the people of the state of the city of New York, the state of New York, as is their charge. So those reasons where if you read this book and didn't really understand what prosecutors are about, and fortunately, you may have read great defense books, telling you the frustrations of being a defense attorney in a system that is geared towards conviction. You don't pound your chest when you win a case when you're the DA. You should win, but you have to prepare the case. So here we were back in Washington, and we talked to the witnesses, and the case was overwhelming on why Oswald could not have killed the president. He was standing in front. I'm not going to go through it. He was standing in front of the president, off to his right ear side, and he saw the fourth shot, which was the fourth shot, hit the president. He didn't see it. That is the shot that was taken from that area by the stockade fence. Just what was to the right of Zapruder taking the film. He saw Zapruder saw the president's head blown off in the back. And when they went to see him in the car, when he collapsed into his wife's right shoulder, his cerebellum was seen by various people, including the Secret Service. Anyway, because Dick was insisting that I try the case, I did tell him the following. I would second seat this case, meaning that I would assist him, which I would way beyond doing in my career at that point. But nevertheless, it didn't matter to me. But it was critical for you, Dick Sprague, to try Boyle. It's you v. Boyle now. It's not you v. someone you're going after. You have overwhelming evidence of his guilt. And he is the one who has to sit in the docket and listen to that evidence. And the best person, the person who earned the right to try this case, was you. The bottom line is Dick did try the case in November, as I said, in '78, and he got a conviction. And that's my story for tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. Oh, there is one other quick Appalachian issue I want to mention to you. Why would the retirees lie? The 23 retirees made up the committee. These are God-fearing people. One of them was Dave Brandenburg. Listen to this. He was a minister of the Fundamentalist Pentecostal Church in Peabody Hollow, that is near Lick Creek. That's the kind of people we're talking about here. So why would they lie? The question is, who did they fear more? God or Tony Boyle? Tony Boyle, at a drop of the hat, would cut off their hospitalization and their pension. 50% of the retirees had black lung. And what are they going to do with black lung? This means your lungs are like tissue paper. Where were they going to go? What were they going to do? Sprague understood this and dealt with them as equals. He understood. He indicted them, but certainly they served no conviction, no sanctions. But that's the kind of person Sprague was. He wasn't one of these dopes riding around being the gung-ho dodo or being the new DAs that we have, for example, in LA and Manhattan, who aren't DAs at all. There's no such thing as self-defense in America today. So anyway, the retirees did come around by themselves, and they told the truth. And that's also part of this case, the power of the truth. It's the power of Sprague, who handled it with the kind of sensitivity, the kind of understanding, the kind of brilliance. You know, as I said before, I was trained to do all this by the best people in the best office in the country. Dick had no training. He's just an incredible human being. And on that note, if you have any questions, I'll answer them.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so very, very much. Really, really touched by your.
Can you speak up?
Can you hear
please?
me? We
Barely.
just want to thank you very, very much for this touching moment, a very spiritual understanding of the law based on a concrete level, and it helped all of us, I'm sure, learn a great deal tonight beyond your literature book and you read. But we have several questions we'd like to ask you. Bob, would you be willing to answer them for us?
Questions you want to answer? You have questions? Do you want to answer the questions?
Oh, I'll answer any questions as long as you can have the stamina to put up with it.
We have the stamina. Bob, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, what inspired me to write the book was when Dick and I were in Washington, we quit the committee. They interfered. When I presented all the evidence that I just mentioned to you in brief form as of the truth of what really happened here, which was astounding. It was astounding to me because it was 14 years later. We were investigating the Kennedy case. How could people have not found this out? And you have all these lawyers running around with their chests pounding, that they found out that there were really 2 coffins in the case. Who the hell cares how many coffins there were? That doesn't tell you who murdered the president. But the evidence, both from the seeing witnesses and acoustics, that was done 14, 15 years later, and the Parkland doctors tell us what happened.
Yeah, but they were talking about inspiring you to write.
And what?
They were talking about what inspired you to write Cold Country Killing.
Well, what I'm saying is what inspired me was I wanted people to know what it takes, how a Richard Sprague did the impossible here. And that
Yes.
impossible was, as I just mentioned, the retirees, that they feared Boyle more than God, and that he played on to that with a great deal of respect. But still indicted them because they had lied. They knew they had lied, obviously. And they had to respect that because that's what Sprague was all about. And I wanted to, in my nonfiction, my first book is Berger the Assassin, which was about my investigation and trial of assassins, members of the Black Liberation Army, so-called group, who went around executing police.
Right,
And I
exactly.
screwed that case up. That wound up at the first trial in a hung jury. It was my fault. And I wanted people to understand why that happened. That is not as an alibi, but how you go back to and fundamentally, don't think because you're wearing back in the day of the Babe and Gehrig, a Yankee uniform, and DiMaggio, that you're going to win every game you play. I made a mistake. I could have nailed this thing down initially, and I had to wait 1 year to do it because that's when the case was back on the calendar. But thank God, I never thought I would not win the case. But I wanted people to understand what it takes from the point of view of the prosecution to deal with these kinds of cases. They're very unique, but they give us a window into the justice system that is very important. And we have to be demanding of that window that it be just.
Yes. I think the term just has resonated into my personal life. The second question we have is, was the news coverage accurate, or did you find out a lot more as you were researching?
No, the news coverage wasn't. Those are the questions I have here from Annie. No, I wrote down, as a matter of fact, not only was it not, that's why I gave the example of this book. Here's someone who's allegedly, writing a factual narrative about what happened. And how do you do that when you don't talk about the reversal? There was no justification here for the reversal. It was speculation on speculation that the court decided to give credibility to. When's the last time that happened? It certainly never happened in any trial that I had. And I had a couple of hundred of them to verdict. And I was responsible when I was in charge of the criminal courts of 35 lawyers who were trying cases every day. So this is not a joke to me. It's very serious because, again, as I say, the justice system is a major reflection on who we are as a civilized people, caring people.
Yeah, I think I get it. And the third question, which you have from Annie, I'm just going to repeat it. Did you realize the depth and scope of the grip the coal miners union held on its members before researching of this book?
You can't hear it.
Did you realize the depth and the grip that the coal miners union had on these people before you started researching the book?
No, I didn't. Once I decided that Dick had asked me to write this book over the last 20 years. And if Patty and I were at dinner with him in Philadelphia, as we were shortly before he passed away, and during the COVID crap, we were there with him at dinner. And while his kids were waving to him outside on the street kind of thing, they didn't want to get too close to him because of COVID. Anyway, he asked me to write the book. And I said, well, you got like 5, 6 books already done. He says, you read them. I want the truth to be told. I can only trust you in this thing.
Mhm.
And so I decided, once I thought about how I would present it, because from page 140 to the end is all Dick Sprague. It's all about what Dick thought. You're in his mind. It's you now, the reader, going through what he is analyzing and how he goes about, particularly, again, for the 18th time, dealing with the retirees. He knows that if they break, this case is over for Boyle. And it's because of his vast experience and and again, I don't exercise this word sufficiently. Brilliance is what he was all about, and fairness.
Mhm.
So I didn't know, I didn't have any inklings about Tough Tony Boyle, about the inherent power of the United Mine Workers. And in my mind was, thank God for that, because they're opposing the Pinkertons, they're opposing major operators who are, not that concerned about giving $115 a month to a family to live on, when you have 180 million and they didn't want to be audited. There's a lot more to that story, but I'm not going to go into that for you now. But yeah, those are the reasons that compelled me to get involved in this. And I was amazed, as you rightfully asked, what my feelings were about the power of the United Mine Workers.
Thank you. We understand and we feel very much, probably all of us, the same as you do. The next question, which you have a copy of it there, I'm assuming. When Jack suspected the 2 hillbilly golf balls, who knocked on his door, were actually there to kill him, why did he not arrange to have more security as suggested?
Yeah, a good question. That's a very fair, legitimate question, but you keep in mind, that was his opinion. It happened to be right. But what was he going to do? Run to the police and say there were 2 guys that, let's take it from an activist point of view. Let's say they went to you as the chief of the district attorney's office and said, there were 2 guys came to my house and I believe they were going to kill me. Well, why do you believe that? What's the evidence? I can't just go upon, I'm not, quarreling with your impression, but I don't go to court on impressions. I need hardcore evidence. And that's the reason why, but keep in mind what he did do. He got a hold of his friend. They went into town and they found the car. They found the car that the 2 characters used when they drove up to the house. But it's a very hard luck thing to say, I'm right, I know they're going to kill me. So what do you do about it? Do you go into hiding? You're not going to get help. I can tell you from my experience, or from you reading the book now, you know exactly what Sprague would have said about that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a very worthwhile question to be asked, but please understand what the limitations are on impressions vis-a-vis hardcore facts and evidence.
I most certainly. An aside question here. Was it curious to you that a 25-year-old daughter lived at home?
Is it curious to you, the 25-year-old daughter lives at home?
I could tell you unequivocally that would be the last thing on my mind. I have defined my life as a satisfier of needs, and there is no one more caring to me than my family. And if my son or daughter decided that they wanted to stay here, I would welcome each one with open arms.
What about a
And
friend?
I don't see my job is to get them hitched or move out. I see
As-
my
as-
job is to make life as comfortable on the pillow as humanly possible. Believe
I
me.
am, sorry, I'm in parallel with you 100%. Another question. Was it surprising to you that the dog didn't bark and alert the family? I
That's a
found that
sort of an open question here. You know, the nature of dogs isn't like you got Rover there, the German Shepherd, ready to eat the piece of people who come in. Tiny dog, maybe a tiny hot dog, you know, to give to them. Who knows, a cracker. These guys were characters. They had committed, you know, scores. I'll be very, very circumspect on that. Not hundreds, but scores of burglaries. They were into you know, what goes on potentially. And the worst thing they have is someone to be home if they're not just homicidal maniacs. Because the breaking of a home is such a serious act. I don't have to tell you or embellish upon that. It's so serious, so that we have to be so careful about all that.
Exactly. The next question, please, sir, is, was there any long-term impact on the union as a result of these murders?
Great question. Here's what happened. During the course of Yablonsky running for president, he had Joe Rauh, R-A-U-H, who was a sensational sole practitioner labor lawyer. He was very much involved in the combine of the United the organization of the ACLU. Yeah, the merger of the two groups that formed the United Mine Workers. Not just the United Mine Workers, but the major confluence of the two major groups that form the I guess it's the ACLU. I'm not sure. I'm losing that thought there for a second. But Rauh said that Yablonsky had been attacked on the campaign trail, that these people were ruthless thugs, and he gave them 100 kind of examples, talking about the importance of evidence. And he wanted the FBI to help him out and protect Yablonsky. They refused to do it. And they said, we can't take, this is an example of the power of the union. The example, here's a great example of it. The nature of the response was from the head of the from the head of the union was that we don't take the side against the union during a union squabble with a member. And so Rauh, who was legendary, I mean, you can look him up, R-A-U-H. He's
General Counsel for Labor Union, Walter Reuther.
Yeah, well, he was very much
And
involved with
for the
Walter
United
Reuther of the United Mine Workers, of the
United
Auto
Auto
Workers, and so on and so on. I could go on forever about Joe Rauh.
Yeah.
And he was on General MacArthur's staff in the Pacific.
Clerk.
He was that kind of a person. He was
Supreme
just
Court.
a tremendous, and every firm obviously wanted him. Talk about being a rainmaker. This was the perfect kind of person, but he insisted on maintaining his own integrity, which he had no trouble doing. But what happened thereafter was, and to fully answer your question, the question is that once the murders occurred, all of this came out, that Rauh had begged them to protect Yablonsky. Nobody thought his wife and daughter would be slaughtered. And that is what changed the entire network of the United Mine Workers. They formed independent democratic groups. They were no longer involved with the Tony Boyles. And John L. Lewis was a tough cookie himself who formed the United Mine Workers. This was not done at a Sunday picnic where you raise your hand and you took a vote. Is it good to have a union? People were getting gunned down on the streets by people who the operators had hired, people that the union was supporting, and so on and so on. It's war on the street. And it's also a testament, I can tell you, to the strength of the women who were involved with their men who wanted to see this union take off because they understood how that would be a countervailing issue for fairness. To get this $115 thing a month was hideous. It's got $180 million in the bank. Well, it's not his money, Bolo's money kind of thing. So the reaction was severe, as it should have been. And the union was democratized as a result of this terrible tragedy. Damn good question. Not that the others weren't.
We have just a couple more questions and you'll be through with us for the evening. But honestly, it's been a pleasure here being with you. How long did it take you to research and write this book?
Dick gave me 10,000 pages of transcripts of the
Yeah.
trials that he had. Add to that the depositions, add to that. It took me 4 years to complete
Oh.
my adventure into doing this book. It wasn't just 4 years of research, it was certainly, and again, when I say 10,000 pages, I know it sounds like a hell of a lot of pages, and indeed, it's a huge number. But when you're trying cases, each case, it's a couple of weeks, let's say, you're dealing here with like over 3,000 pages of transcript. But it's critical when you do a book like this, you want to know what was said at the sidebar that's on the record. You need to know everything that's here. So I had Dick. I mean, I had, not, unfortunately only for 46 years, but all his memory about this case and the things that went down continued to cause me to do everything humanly possible I can do so that the world would know what he did, because as I said to you, he wanted the truth to come out. And that wasn't just about him. When I told him how I would handle this book, it was very different from what he thought was going to happen. And that's why anyone who wants to really know about the book, the co-writing here on the issue of coal mining per se, I wanted the reader to understand what was involved with going 100 feet into the earth. It's mind-bending to me. It's bad enough sometimes you can't wear a sport jacket with a tie in court, nor should you. You got to come in a suit. That's the way the game is played. But to do what they did and do requires a tremendous amount of explication, of understanding that this is the way they're going to feed their family. And when they come up every day, you see exactly what they went through going down. So it inspired me to continue on and do the right thing here.
Well, sir, you inspire us to believe in the truth. Just a couple more questions. When you are a co-author, do you write equally, or is there a difference?
Well, when you're a co-author, the reason I had the co-author here, as I said, from 140 on, it was a setup for page 140 throughout the rest of the book. But I wanted the predicate for you to understand what is involved. So my collaborator and I had done some good work in the past. I have the utmost respect for him and his work. I go through every word. I go through every semicolon and comma, believe me, before I offer it for publication. But it's very helpful. It's very helpful, and particularly in this kind of aspiration, in order to get into my dear friend's head and let the world know what the hell's going on here.
Yes, very good. Thank you for that one. Historical truth as it relates to politics and power lends one to think, have things in real time politically changed?
I'm just looking at the question here. Historical truth as it relates to politics and power lends one to think that
Have things in real time politically changed?
yeah, the answer is, of course. I mean, that's why we need people who are dedicated. I mean, that's why we need people who are honest. That's why, as hard as it is for me to tell people to go into politics today, given what's going on in our country, and people want to destroy our country who are in Washington. Oh, go to Washington. Yeah, help destroy our country. Yeah, when you meet George Washington, Jefferson, Adams, explain to them what they give us wasn't worth keeping.
Exactly. Well, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And just an aside here, my son just retired from NYPD as a lieutenant commander of homicide. And so we've listened to his stories over the years, and it's an honor to know that he's in line with your thinking, and so are we. Thank you for the truth, sir, from the bottom of my heart.
Yes.
And what can
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you for being there.
Then you had just a suggestion here. Do you see any changes in the future based on the material and the book and the research that you've done? Do we have hope? Is there hope, sir? Here?
Yes, I unequivocally am hopeful. Believe me, I believe, you see, I believe in the flyover. I believe every light I see there when I'm going to Manhattan is a family. And I believe with all the service that's involved with raising a family anywhere in America, that what they're doing in Washington is the destruction of our values. This is a war of values. And I'm not going to simply sit back and say, we're prepared to lose the war because I can't get out of my chair, whatever the hell it is. And I have too much love and respect. Look, I thank God I was born in Brooklyn and I'm an American. That says everything I can say about who I am. And I do believe rather that my feelings about that are shared by the overwhelming majority of Americans. And I don't care what they say about last night. He earned that last night. There's no one like him. I don't know what kind of energy sources he has.
Iowa, you mean?
The Iowa, of course. But I don't know how he has the energy to do what he does. But I'm amazed that he does it. And again, this is a guy with a giant brain. I'm not into all the anti stuff. I'm into the fact of what the facts were when he was president and the things he did, he said he would do and more. That's what I'm interested in, because that's what the American people need. We need that kind of leadership. And I'm a big believer that we're not going to quit. We're not going down here. We're not going down with the,
Bob, can I jump in here before we say good night and thank you so much? I have to ask you about the conspiracy theory into the JFK assassination. You have to spill the beans. Please share everything, every little detail with us. No, please. Please. I know we have to wait for your book. We promise we'll buy your book and we're going to do this again, but spill the beans.
The new book. She promised you'll buy the new book.
yeah,
That's
no, I'm
Walgreens.
just saying that,
About the
there's the unequivocal evidence, which was very much gone into in detail for corroboration purposes. And Sprague,
no, we're talking. You're talking about the JFK.
yeah. But on the JFK side of this was Sprague and I knew that we were being wiretapped and that we were being followed. We have all evidence of this. We set them up to see whether or not this was real. Sadly, it was. And the fact of the matter is that when you're dealing with people who have the power to be in the executive agencies and they have the Congress as the overseers, I could tell you that when I hear Schumer say, Trump is crazy, doesn't he know you can't take on
The CIA.
the CIA because they have 10 ways to Sunday to screw you. This is the guy in charge of oversight of the CIA. That's the executive agencies we're talking about here. And for him to even believe that is worthy of him, giving up his post. But that's, anyway, what I'm saying is that given what we found out, and Sprague and I had one person with us, Cliff Fenton, who grew up in Harlem. He was my very, very dearest friend in the Manhattan DA's office. He was the top detective in Manhattan. And he came down with us. And we kept this very close to the vest. But I told Lou Stokes everything. And I had subpoenas. This is probably a relevant portion of this. I had subpoenas because I had word from the CIA that Cliff Fenton had from the New York City detectives who are now working there, that everything we had was legitimate, and they had memoranda that confirmed it. That's how arrogant they are. And the was the participation in the assassination of the President of the United States. And so I went to Lou and I said, I want to get this material. They have it. He said, Bob, they're not going to, the majority of this committee is not going to do anything now with you. They're afraid. I said, why'd you hire me? I told you not to hire me. They said, we never thought you would do it. We never thought you would find anything. I said, Lou, I don't have witnesses in the basement of a house that we're renting right now. They're not professionals and following me around the country. Anyone could have done what I did. And he said, well, I can't do it. I said, I always had a good relationship with him, and it continued. He asked me to do his biography, et cetera, because I knew that this was not his committee, no matter how you cut it. He could have gone to the mattresses, but he wouldn't do it. There are too many committees he's on. There's too much going on here with this stuff. There's too much fear. And we remain friendly, as I just said. But I said, he says, what are you going to do now? I said, as of now, I resign.
After 4 months, only
And
4
I will,
months.
and I will definitely tell Dick, as I tell Dick everything that we do at night here. He was disgusted with everything, so he stayed in Philly, and we spoke every night. And I said it, by the way, as I walked out the door. So he said, I thought you'd say this. As I walked out the door, I turned to him and I said, does all this apply to Sprague as well? He said, absolutely. I said, okay. I called Dick up. I told him what happened. I told him I'm gone. I'm not going to stay. And he said, don't do anything until I get down there. The rest you'll read about, what happened that night. But all I can tell you is it's no simple thing for me to say to anyone that the worst thing you can do in the justice system, in my opinion, which I'm still involved in that, is because it is to arrest and convict an innocent person. That is exactly who we are not in America. We exonerate innocent people. That's what should be going on, not the reverse. So is it frustrating going on today with this, what's going on? Yeah, of course. But I'm a believer that the world will change in less than a year. In the election. I believe that. Anyway, that's my belief. It could be foolish or foolhardy, or whatever you want to call it. You have the right to do it. But
Agreed.
that's the bottom line.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
I wonder if anybody else here in the group has any questions, and I'm happy to pass this around.
Martha?
Do we have any questions? It was so complete, Bob. You are so thorough. You're a gem. You're a total gem. Bob, why aren't you in Washington? Why aren't you in Washington? Because he's smart, as Ann said. I thought that before you were mayor of Beverly Hills 2 times. I thought, what are you doing in Beverly Hills? Come on, go to the Hill.
That book was coming out. Yeah, when's the book coming out?
Oh, when is the book coming out? Everybody wants to know when the JFK book is coming out.
Well, first I have to finish it. My agent has it now. So Annie, I'll keep you posted.
Good.
Okay.
And then we all want first editions autographed. We'll be lining up. Okay. Bob, you're amazing. Thank you so much for giving a little bit of yourself to us tonight. You're a gem.
Well, thank you.
From the
Thank you.
1981 until 2024, you're a gem.
Thank you.
Thank you from my heart.
Thank you.
Good night.
And married the best woman possible. Patty
What'd you say?
is. He married the best woman possible.
Oh,
Behind every great man, we know there's a greater woman.
Yeah, I'll jump to that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you
God
for your
bless.
time. God bless you.
You too.
Allison, thank